Okay. There we are. We got it. All right. So, welcome back, everybody. Let's give everybody a minute to get in here. Thank you very much for your help, Corey.
Welcome.
All right. We have people coming in. Kellye and I were talking about the different types of medicines and things we can make at home, and thought it would be fun to have a class on how easy it is to do this at home. You don't need any special equipment. You can forage for plants in your wilderness areas around you. You can grow them in your yard, or you can make them from dry plant material. So Kellye made a list of things that are real easy to make at home. And so we're going to go over those. This is my wonderful friend, Kellye, who is so smart and beautiful and lovely to be part of this with me today. I'm really happy to have you with me, Kellye.
Thank you. It is my pleasure being here. Hi, everybody.
All right, let's get started. Kellye, you're first. We're going to talk about tincture.
Okay. The first thing that I decided to make, I usually make tinctures for work with CBD and that sort of stuff, but I really wanted to learn about other plant allies. And the one that I chose to make for this particular class is a sage tincture. And we'll talk about labeling and whatnot in just a minute. I don't know if you can see everything in here, but it's just basically, this is a low profile mason jar, and I put some sage in there and poured some alcohol over it, and done. So a tincture, let me tell you a little bit about them. A tincture is typically an extract of plant, hold on, I need my eyes, extract of plant or animal material dissolved in ethanol, vodka, or Everclear, something like that. Solvent concentrations of 25 to 60% are common, but may run as high as 90%. In herbal medicine, alcohol tinctures are made with various ethanol concentrations, 20% being the most common. I can tell you that the alcohol that I chose for my tincture was a 50% or 100 proof alcohol. I believe just half water, half alcohol is a little better at extracting certain things from the plant. Water actually can extract things, but alcohol does it too. So because water and alcohol are soluble together, it really works well. Other solvents for producing tinctures include vinegar, glycerol, also called glycerin, diethyl ether, and propylene glycol, not all of which can be used for internal consumption. Ethanol has the advantage of being an excellent solvent for both acidic and basic or alkaline constituents. A tincture using glycerin is called a glycerite. Glycerin is generally a poorer solvent than ethanol. Vinegar, being acidic, is a better solvent for obtaining alkaloids, but a poorer solvent for acidic components. For individuals who choose not to ingest alcohol, non-alcoholic extracts offer an alternative for preparations meant to be taken internally. So some people, recovering alcoholics or someone, a child, you may not want to give them some alcohol, even if it's by the drop. It may not be appropriate for your needs at the time.
Sure.
The methods for making a tincture, the downside to using an alcohol as a solvent is that ethanol has a tendency to denature. That means basically proteins or nucleic acids lose their quaternary, tertiary, or secondary structure, which is present in their native state, causing disruption of cell activity and possibly cell death. It will denature some organic compounds, reducing or destroying their effectiveness. So if you have something that you leave, say you let it sit for too long or something like that. What I've experienced, and my work environment and other, working with making tinctures is sometimes it can, if you're using some sort of other solvent aside from alcohol, it can go rancid. The alcohol can denature it. It's not really a good thing. You definitely don't want to drink that type of thing.
No.
So ether and propylene glycol based tinctures are not suitable for internal consumption, although they are used in preparations for external use, such as personal care creams and ointments, which is a homogeneous, viscous, semi-solid preparation, most commonly a greasy, thick oil. 80% oil, 20% water with a high viscosity, intended for external application to the skin or mucous membranes. So our
ethyl or ethers, excuse me.
It's okay.
Ether and propylene glycol, are those easy for somebody to purchase online or for making their own things?
Yes, absolutely. The ethanol, you could, so the ether and propylene glycol, you can purchase those. I have seen ether at Lowe's, home and garden stores. Propylene glycol, though, that would probably be something you would find online, probably Amazon. But when they send it to you, they're gonna say, "Oh, it's a toxic thing," so they're going to make sure that it's well protected during the shipping. So, I've not personally used ether in. I'm trying to think. I don't think I've ever used ether. I've used acetone. I've used hexane. I've used denatured alcohol. I've used all other types, but ether is not something I'm really crazy about using.
Okay. I've used dry ice.
Oh yes, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yes. Now the next slide, number 4, the fourth slide there, it will show you some of the different solvents that can be used. So there you'll see alcohol. I used avocado oil for one of my things. It's not truly, if you're using alcohol, it's not truly a quote tincture. However, a lot of people still use oils for their tinctures. In fact, I do. I use MCT oil, which is essentially coconut oil.
Yeah.
It's really easy to use. It's not something that is very difficult to find. In fact, you can find coconut oil, which is the same as MCT. It's a medium chain triglyceride. And it's very easy to find, in your grocery store even. It's everywhere now. It's becoming a little more popular. So there you also see honey. There's 2 types of honey there. There's raw honey and Manteca honey, which is really good stuff. And I believe I have bourbon and brandy on there as well.
Nice.
So, and I think we probably need some of that right now. Anyway.
Yes. I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
When you use a mix of water and alcohol for tincturing, do you use distilled water, or do you just use tap water? Do you use filtered water? What do you use?
I prefer to use distilled water because you can, what happens is, if you use spring water or something like that, it might have minerals in there which may extract themselves, not really extract themselves, but it just, you don't want the added things. That the distilled water is the purest form in using. That's my experience anyway. Some people may prefer to use other types of water, but I prefer using distilled water for a lot of my mixtures.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you for that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about an oxymel. An oxymel is blended, is dry or fresh herbs done with, extracted with vinegar and honey. Hippocrates said, "You'll find the drink called oxymel often very useful, for it promotes expectoration and freedom of breathing." An oxymel is a mixture made for improving your breathing when you have congestion in your lungs, when you have phlegm, when you have a sore throat, when you have raw throat from coughing and bronchitis. All of this. Asthma even is benefits from this if you choose your herbs accordingly. So you'll take your dry material and cover it in a blend of honey and vinegar. This is by my readings and by practice done with to taste. Some people really can't deal with the vinegar, and some people really want it a little sweeter. I don't prefer it very sweet, so mine are about 1 part honey and 2 parts of vinegar to 1 part honey. So it's a little more tart. Apple cider vinegar is preferred because it has a mother in it, and that mother helps to break down your plant material. In the ancient Greek word oxymeli translates to acid and honey. The simplest definition is an herbal extraction of vinegar and raw honey. Most often, people use raw apple cider vinegar, which boasts a host of healthful qualities on its own, bringing together the acid of apple cider vinegar with the healthful properties of honey in a fantastic way to get the benefits of both, while extracting and ingesting supportive herbs, particularly pungent ones that aren't always pleasant to take on their own. Herbs can be really bitter, and one of the things with herbal medicine that is a challenge is getting your kids and getting people in general to put things in their mouth that smell and taste really bitter. So this one is kind of, honey-based extractions are really helpful in this way because they help people who are a little bit hesitant to take something bitter to be willing to do it. Organic apple cider vinegar is high in acetic acid, and when you use the raw and filtered version, you're also getting the mother strands of protein, enzymes, and healthful bacteria, which if you've ever had a kombucha tea, you've seen the mother at the bottom of that. It's good for your digestion. It's good for all the flora in your gut. So this is another benefit of this. And honey brings really soothing qualities and provides germ-fighting properties. So these 2 ingredients alone are beneficial as they stand by themselves, but when you add the herbs, you have a really effective method of getting extra herbal support. So there's a couple different ways you can make them. You can, and I made mine with the stir, shake, and sit method, where you put your dry herbs in your jar, cover it with honey and vinegar, stir it in a little bit, and then you want to wipe the edge of the inside of your jar so that you don't have anything that's exposed to air, because anything that's exposed will mold. So wipe your lid down and then make sure that all of your dry material is covered, and crank the lid on and shake it thoroughly. Store it in a cool, dark place for a couple of weeks, and then you're going to strain out your herbs, press it really, you can put it in a cheesecloth and press out all of the liquid from there, and what you have left, you put into a clean container, and there's your medicine. That's the method I used for mine. I'll show you here.
That's pretty.
It just smelled so good. It's so much fun to do these things in the kitchen. It makes the kitchen smell so great.
Yes.
So then you want to label and date them, and we'll talk about labeling and dating later. Another method for doing this, if you are using things that are not so delicate, if you're using hardy herbs or roots, want to put your dry material in twice as much vinegar as you ultimately want to put in a bottle. And you're going to boil it, bring it to a boil for a little bit. And as soon as it starts to boil, turn it down to simmer and let it simmer for 30 to 40 minutes. And then remove it from the heat. And when it cools off, strain your things out, and then you can add your honey and then jar it. So there's 2 different methods of making them. I don't like to heat my honey or my vinegar, so I think it's worth the time to let it sit on the counter. So that's how I would do that. A couple of special notes. Babies under the age of a year should never be given raw honey, so no oxymel for babies. They should be avoided during pregnancy and breastfeeding. And I like to use local wildflower honey for the flavor, but also it's nice to support your local apiists, and wild natural grown honey is that's not been processed or pasteurized maintains its integrity. If you're not so fond of sage honey or orange honey, whatever's local to you, grab up some clover honey. It's pretty neutral flavor. And you don't have to use raw apple cider vinegar, but a lot of people really like the benefits of it. So this is definitely good. I'm sorry, I'm hearing myself over on Corey's desk. It is an excellent way to do an alcohol-free extract. So the one that I made, I put I had lungwort, chaparral, peppermint in here, and I used some local honey and apple cider vinegar, and I covered it just according to the directions we discussed. And in about 2 weeks, I'll strain that off, and it's really distracting. I'm going to try and see where it's coming from. Excuse me.
Sure.
All right. While you talk about an infusion, I'm going to sort this out.
Excellent. That sounds good. Okay, so for an infusion, I actually made 2 things. I decided to make 2 things just because I don't know, I had some extra Eastern white pine needles left over. I'd collected a huge basket of it. And I'd also found some goldenrod. So this is what my goldenrod looks like. This is goldenrod and honey, period. It's super easy. Same thing with this. This is, I don't know if you guys can see that or not. This is chopped up pine needles and honey. So super easy. Let's see, goldenrod. The reason I chose goldenrod, well, 2 reasons actually. The first reason being, I happened to be at my cousin's house and looked in the back of his yard, and I was exploring, and I found a huge patch of it, and so I collected it, and that was really exciting for me because I've just recently moved back to Tennessee. And I'm relearning, looking at things through different eyes at this point. I've learned a lot since I've been away. It's been almost 30 years now. So I'm learning some new things, and I decided to make an infusion with goldenrod specifically. Let me read you a couple of things about it. Goldenrod is... It's a beautiful plant. And
do you want me to put up your slides of the goldenrod?
Sure, if you'd like to. That's
okay,
fine.
Yeah. Hold on, where'd they go? There you are.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so the goldenrod, the reason I decided to use this oh wait, hold on.
Someone's mentioning if the honey ferments, it'll crack the jar to the CO2 expansion.
Thank you.
That's
I saw that.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Thank you for that. Sorry, I'm not paying attention to chat. By the way, hi, Mom. Anyway, so there are a few different reasons that you can use certain things. The the thing with certain plants is that they produce a little more water than others. So that can really affect.
You left them under your microphone.
That's on.
Sorry, I'm looking through my.
Sorry, Kellye.
No worries.
You left your headphones under the microphone and it was feeding into the.
Is this picking up?
Not now. It was. Sorry, guys.
It's okay. All right. So, infusions are really easy. You make it an infusion each time you make tea. Now, we'll talk about this in a little while, but the process of extracting chemical compounds or flavors from plant material and solvents such as water, oil, or alcohol by allowing the material to remain suspended in the solvent over time. So you're steeping it. Also, the name of the resultant liquid is called an infusion. The extraction involving boiling the plant material. So that's a decoction, I believe. Is that how you pronounce that?
Yes.
Alicia? Okay, great.
Some people call it a decoction. Some call it decoction.
I see. Awesome. Okay.
Either is correct.
Well, good. Then it wasn't just the South. Then, okay, cool. So anyway, typically the solvent and plant material are boiled and heated, or the solvent only is heated, then poured over the plant material to. Now, what I can tell you that I did with this, put it inside of a pot, and it was a double boiler, and I warmed it. I didn't even put it above the 2 mark, and I only left it in there for just a minute. The purpose was just to loosen it a bit, to get it to where it would pour more easily over certain things like the goldenrod or the Eastern white pine needles. It was really thick, and they kind of bunch up together. So I decided to just warm it slightly. I wasn't doing it, for any other intention. So let's see, where did I stop? Okay, so types of infusions are tea, coffee, infused oils such as chilies, lemon, garlic, vinegars using plant materials, steeping can vary from a few minutes to weeks or even months. So if you're making an infusion, I know you guys have probably seen these in stores, like if you've gone to Williams-Sonoma or Pottery Barn or any place like that, you'll see they have like garlic infused olive oil or something like that. These things are super easy to make, guys. You can totally do this at home on your own without paying $20 to $30 for the entire bottle.
Oh, and they make super great gifts.
It's
super fun to do for holidays.
Absolutely. Just about every year I'll decide to make my own gifts. And it's something more personal if you make it as opposed to going, I'm not saying if you go out and buy something, but you're picking something out. But it's a little more personal. If you make something and you have that person in mind, it sometimes, it'll mean a little bit more to the person, to the recipient. We'll say that. So, okay, percolation. I'm sure you guys have heard about percolating coffee. Water is passed through the material, for example, coffee, steeping the herbs or plant material until the solvent absorbs the oils and flavors. Then the plant matter is strained out before consumption. This is the most common method for creating an infusion. Okay, and let me see where I left off here. Okay, so the pine needle infusion, this is what making. This thing is so incredibly easy. I'm just going to explain how I did it, and then I'll double check everything to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Sure.
So I had a big basket of pine needles. Now, it really depends on, hold on one second, Julian. I see your question, and I'll get right to that.
Can you pull up that one page while she's talking about it? Just the one?
Yeah.
Sure.
So they can read it?
There you go.
Excellent.
Is that bigger? Is that help, guys?
That's perfect. Yes.
Okay.
So the pine needle infusion is basically what I did was I took some pine needles from my brother's yard. It was in his, just in front there. So I took his pine needles and chopped them up and into little bitty pieces, maybe a quarter of an inch long. Took those, threw those into a bowl, and then I warmed up my honey slightly, put the pine needles inside of my little tiny jar, and then poured the honey over it, and done. Now I did fill it up to the very top. I made sure all of the plant material was covered. Sometimes you can leave just a small gap, but anytime you're trying to create any of these creations here, I would highly recommend filling it to as close as you can to the top. The only exception, at least in my experience, and Alicia, you can talk about this if you'd like, the only exception would be if you have, if you're using pure alcohol, especially pure grain alcohol. If you fill it all the way to the top and you have your standard mason jar type thing, what happens is it starts corroding the inside of this, and then you've got a big mess on your hands.
It does.
It's not good. So you can leave a tiny amount of space between your liquid and the cap, but for the most part, you do want to fill it up as closely as you can to the very top. So needle infusion. I did mention using an air container. I prefer using mason jars just because you can reuse them, you can sanitize them. They can take a lot of damage, so to speak. You can do a lot of things to them, and they hold. They don't break very easily unless, of course, you drop them on tile, which trust me, that works.
Well, then it's everywhere.
That's the truth. So, okay, so you can place a small amount. Let's see what I have here. Let me put on my eyes again. Sorry, guys. Place a small amount of honey into the jar and add the pine needles. You can also alternate. Oh, yeah, that was something else. So you can put a little bit of honey in the bottom first, and then you sprinkle some of your pine needles, and then a little more honey, a little more pine needles, back and forth. It just makes things a little bit easier. That way, you're not having to wait for the honey to work its way through all of the plant material. Even heating it sometimes, it doesn't necessarily work so well. So after you've filled everything, then you want to make sure you seal the jar and label it with your date. That way you'll know this is when I started this process, and then 4 to 6 weeks later, or however long it is that you're making anything, you can take an estimation. You can use a big calendar and write on there, whatever it is that's quote due that day, or you can even put double check it a week before or something like that. So now when you're finished with this pine needle infusion, you can eat it by the teaspoonful, or you can add it to hot water for instant tea. The needles are very thick. Like if you live in Colorado, which is where I just moved from, or if you live someplace where the pine needles are extremely thick, you may want to filter those out, because that can be really rough on your throat.
Sure.
Now, getting back to what the pine, so if you're using pine in this way, it's great for coughs. It's great for I'm looking at my notes. One moment. Let's see here. Okay, so they can be used for all kinds of things. They also have a high amount of vitamin C. And this is something I learned, but not as high as rose hips. And we'll talk about those in just a minute, too.
Okay.
But the needles can be used to break up. You can put them in a steam bath, and they can be used to break up the phlegm in your lungs. So if you've got a sore throat, or if you're you have a cough or bronchitis or laryngitis or any type of chest congestion, pine is fantastic for that type of thing.
Excellent.
I think that's it. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. There was a question about using a wax seal in your mason jars. Would a wax seal be appropriate, or maybe just cover with plastic before you put your lid on? What do you suggest?
That's a great point. You can use paraffin wax, or you can use any other type of wax. If you're using paraffin, that may actually work better because it's not reactionary. It's not going to react with whatever is inside there. It's just wax. You can also use beeswax though. So
Sure.
if you've got liquid beeswax and you pour that on top, that can do the exact same thing. In fact, I would probably prefer to use beeswax, especially if you're making, something with honey. May as well, if you found a local farmer, a local honey beekeeper person, I can't remember the word you used earlier, but we'll call him a beekeeper. You can just tell them, hey, I want some honeycomb as well, and then you can melt it down yourself or whatever. That is a great question. If you don't have access to either one of those, then sure, you can cover them with plastic or whatever you have on hand.
Okay.
You can be creative and do. And Lacey, did that answer your question?
Excellent.
I wanted to make sure. I see her question there. What are pine needles used for? So the bottom line is, think of upper respiratory things. Pine is fantastic for that type of thing.
Excellent. Thank you, Kellye.
You're very welcome.
Okay. Yes, she got her answer. Thank you.
Yay!
Yay. So next we're going to talk about a liniment. A liniment is a liquid that is made for, it's a heat rub, and it is used for applying to muscles and sore joints. It can also be formulated into a lotion or a balm. Vicks is kind of a liniment. Bengay is a liniment. Tiger Balm is a liniment, even though it's a liquid. Those are different types of ones that you can find over the counter, in your pharmacy shelves. But they're really easy to make. And I find that making them is actually, they smell a little better, they work a little deeper, and they last a really long time. It doesn't take much of a homemade liniment to get in and work out a lot of soreness, muscle soreness, and joint soreness. Liniments typically are used to relieve pain and stiffness from muscular aches, strains, and arthritis. They are typically formulated from alcohol or acetone and contain a counter-irritant aromatic chemical compounds, such as methyl salicylate, which is wintergreen oil. Cinnamon oil is another counter irritant, where if you rubbed that on your skin by itself, it would bring some circulation up to your skin. It caused a little redness because it draws the circulation there. Benzoin resin, menthol, or capsaicin are also other counter irritants, and typically they're included in there. And I did include menthol in mine.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, you can get menthol crystals. They are extremely potent. It only takes a little pinch of them, and they look like broken up selenite crystals.
Oh, wow.
But when you open the container, it makes your eyes feel cold and your nose feel cold. It makes everything feel cold, and it's wonderful. So a counter irritant means it causes stimulation that draws circulation into action within the area applied to cause warmth and coloring to the skin, showing that it is increased circulation. A liniment will produce a feeling of warmth in the skin and the muscle of the area where they are applied. So liniments are probably not good for mucous membrane areas, genital areas, eyes, inside the ears. These are not places you would want to apply a liniment. They're really easy to make. The first liniment I ever made, my neighbor was a martial artist, and he studied all these really interesting herbs, and he trained under a man who used to compete against, what is his name? The actor who was a martial artist with the reddish hair. Dang it, I can't think of his name.
I know who you're talking about.
You know who I'm talking about. It'll come to me. But he
totally do.
Yeah, his master used to compete against this man, and his master was trained in a very fine line of arts that were passed down only to certain people, and so he spent a lot of time with me, teaching me some of the things that he knew when I was younger, and so he took me down to this Chinese herbalist in Irvine, and she had this wall that was all these little brown cubbies, and he gave her a list of words I couldn't read, and she brought out all of this stuff and laid them on the counter, and he shook his head at her, and we paid for it, and we went home, and we made my first ever liniment. It was so much fun.
That's cool.
It was really cool. And so that liniment had loquat leaves and cinnamon and eucalyptus leaves and all kinds of things in it, and some very unusual roots and things that I still don't know what we put in there. I still have a little bit of that liniment left. I hate to use it because I don't have access to those ingredients. So, that's kind of a special jar for me. But the liniment that I made, it was really cool. So basically you just put your dry herbs into your jar and you cover it with rubbing alcohol. And you give it a good shake and you cover it. And the longer you let it sit, the stronger it is. I let it sit for about 4 weeks before I give it to anybody for themselves. But 4 weeks, 6 weeks, the longer you can let it sit, the stronger it's going to be. I will take material out after about 10 weeks and put in fresh material and more alcohol as it goes, until I feel like it looks the right way, it smells the right way. It's kind of like cooking when it's the right color, all of it. This is how I make my liniment. And when you use menthol crystals, you only need a pinch. So pinch your crystal, grab a little pinch, put them in and grind them up, and then throw them in the bottom with your dry material. These are external use only, and keep it stored in a cool, dry place. You can put it directly on your skin, or you can dab a cotton ball in there and then rub it into the area that hurts. Don't rub too hard or vigorously, because things like cinnamon, pepper, like capsaicin, can cause some skin irritation, and that really won't feel too great. So, yes, Chuck Norris, thank you.
Thank you, Beebs.
Yes, thank you. So, a couple special notes on liniments. Rubbing alcohol is typically used to make liniments because it extracts the herbal constituents and rapidly penetrates and evaporates from the skin. So this is not an oily application. When you put this on your skin, you'll feel a little cooling first because the alcohol is evaporating from your skin, and then the plant material that's left behind there will warm it up. You can also use vodka, witch hazel. If rubbing alcohol, I'm always cold. So sometimes, if I need a liniment in the wintertime, I will use witch hazel instead, because it doesn't make me as cold as rubbing alcohol. And vinegar is a useful solvent, but it's not really pleasant in the smell department. So that, if you don't want to go around smelling like a pickle jar, that's probably not the one to use. Sure. Basically, you'll need a menstruum, which is your liquid, your vodka, witch hazel, alcohol, rubbing alcohol, and some dry herbs. And that's about all it takes to produce a liniment. So here's a picture of the liniment I made. I also incorporated some essential oils that are good for pain relief. I added, along with my cinnamon bark, I put black pepper, eucalyptus, lavender, yarrow, and some mint in there. And then I added oregano oil, ylang ylang oil to bring up the floralness of it just a little bit, and arnica oil for pain relief, and a pinch of my menthol crystals. And I stirred the essential oils into my dry herbs first, and then I poured my menstruum over it and covered it up. That's basically how you do your liniment.
That is a beautiful creation that you have there. I was just looking at that. Wow, it looks very fall-like, but I'll bet it works really, really well.
It smells really good. You won't feel awful about wearing this. You know, if you put wintergreen oil in or wintergreen plant in your liniment, you're going to smell like Bengay. That's what gives Bengay that smell, is the wintergreen. And if you find that an unpleasant odor, this is a way to totally get around that.
Gotcha.
Then strain, bottle, and label, and there you go. Are these
Okay.
considered salves? No, this is a liniment. You can take the liquid after you strain your plant out, Beebs, and use that liquid for making it into a salve. But you don't necessarily need to make it thick and oily. It works really great, just really watery and liquidy, you know, the way it is right out of the jar. It cools off your, you know, it evaporates from your skin quickly, and your skin soaks it in easily. So no need to make this one into a salve.
That makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. So here you go, Kellye. Talk about Elixir.
Okay, so I was flipping through things here, and I realized that I called Goldenrod Elixir. It's actually not an elixir. The Goldenrod that I made is actually an infusion. We'll go into that in just a minute, though. Okay. So let's talk about elixirs. Elixirs are absolutely fantastic. I am really excited to have made this. Let's see here. So it's a clear, sweet flavored liquid used for medicinal purposes, to be taken orally, and intended to cure one's ills. It's hydroalcoholic solution of at least one active ingredient. The alcohol is mainly used to solubilize the active ingredients and some excipients, retard the crystallization of sugar. So you want to stop, because you're using honey, you want to stop it from turning into a sugar or crystallizing. Preserve the finished product, so it's natural preservative, so is honey. Provide a sharpness to the taste, aid in masking the unpleasant flavor or pleasant taste of active ingredients, and then enhance the flavor. You want to choose the lowest alcoholic quantity that will dissolve the active ingredients completely and give a clear solution that will produce the best results. High concentrations of alcohol give a burning taste to the final product. That, by the way, is another reason that I usually don't use more than 50% alcohol. If I am fully extracting something that I'm not actually going to be ingesting, I'll use Everclear or something with a very high percentage. But generally speaking, if I'm making something like this, I'm going to use no more than 100 proof or 50% alcohol for that particular reason. So elixirs should be stored in a tightly closed, light-resistant container away from direct heat and sunlight. And that reminds me, I wanted to show you guys this. So this is a ball jar. This one's actually colored purple, and I'm kind of a fan of purple. So I ended up getting
that's
these.
pretty.
I love these types of things. They make them in purple, amber, blue, you name it, all kinds of colors, but something that will help resist sunlight, or any other type of light. That's exactly what your intention is.
Okay.
So you can use something like this type of jar or something, you know, with a nice lid on it. It comes out and it's totally fine. But you would have to store it in a cool, dark place, and you definitely don't want to expose this to sunlight, especially while you're doing your extraction. So you want to make sure everything is away from any type of light while you're curing. Maybe that's a better word. You're curing things. So, all right. So let me show you what I made. I made a rosemary elixir. I went to, around here, apparently there were 2 big bushes, probably 8 feet wide. These things were huge, of rosemary. And I went and I started clipping away, and they were even producing beautiful flowers. So I got really excited about that. I've never seen rosemary produce flowers before, but that was really super cool. So this is my rosemary elixir. The first thing, I don't know if you guys can see this. The first thing that I did was I removed the rosemary from the plant, from the stems, and then I got everything else ready. So let's talk a little bit about, again, yes, I sort of included the goldenrod elixir. That actually is not correct. So let's make a rosemary elixir. So I took my plant matter and I set it down. Now, one thing I wanted to mention here is that I did not wash this, the rosemary, after I harvested. And the reason I did not is you can, but you want to make sure that it is fully dry before you put it into any jar to make an elixir or infusion or anything else from it. Simple water content will change things, and it could actually spoil everything that you're making. You want to take, you know, the fewest risks possible. The other thing that you can do is, let's say you put it in there without washing it. It's okay. You can use cheesecloth and you can strain it out, or fine mesh strainer, anything you'd like to use. You can totally just strain out everything. So I pulled everything off of the stem and I set it down for just a little bit. Then I got my unflavored vodka, which is 50% or 100 proof. My raw honey, I also took that again in a double boiler and just warmed it barely enough to where it was a little looser, so that it would, you know, fall through all of the plant material inside the jar. I did, by the way, when I filled this, I put about this much rosemary in here. It was almost to the top. And I just left a little bit of a gap at the very top there to give some room so that I can pour everything in there equally. Now, for a jar like this, you would use, of course, this is a pint, so you would use a cup of honey and a cup of your alcohol. But the thing is, you're going to have some of that displaced because you've got your plant material. So you can have a cup ready of each one and just sort of set it aside. Then after you've used equal portions, then you've got your honey. You may have a little honey left over, and the alcohol, just drink it. I'm just playing. I'm totally teasing. So, all right. So anyway, you want to remove the rosemary from your stem, put it in a bowl. Then you want to place it inside of your jar, but you don't want to pack it down in there. You want to leave a little bit of room for, you know, your stuff that you're adding in there, your honey and your alcohol. If you start packing it down, it's going to make it more difficult for everything to move through that plant material. So you use your equal parts of honey and your alcohol, whatever type you want to use. I used vodka for this, but you can also use brandy. You can use bourbon. You can use whatever you want. But if you have a 50% alcohol concentration, that's going to be the best one that will extract for you. You'll also have to consider the fact that your plant will also have some water in it too, so it's not going to be super incredibly strong. The purpose is for the honey and the alcohol to come together and coalesce and work with the plant and pull everything out And, you know, that's your medicine right there. That's free medicine that you really didn't have to go spend a bunch of money for a copay, and it will help you quite a bit. I'll go into what rosemary does in just a moment. So you want to put your vodka or whatever alcohol in there and your honey, and then put it almost to the very top. Again, because you're using alcohol, you want to leave maybe an 1/8 or a 1/16 of an inch, you know, near the top. You don't want to actually allow the alcohol to touch the lid because it will start corroding. And again, you don't want rust in your stuff. That's not good, I promise. Then you're going to close the jar very well. You don't want to, like, you know, fix it to where it's not going to open, you know, at a later date. Then you can shake it. And when you shake it, what's happening is your honey and your alcohol are mixing. When I put this in here in the very beginning, the honey was stuck down in here. So what I should have done was maybe put a little honey, a little bit of alcohol to kind of jumpstart everything, and then place my rosemary inside of this jar and then finish it off. But, you know, this was the first time I made this type of elixir, so I learned a little bit, you know, some shortcuts. So you want to make sure you also put a label with a date on there. You can store this for like 4 to 6 weeks or something, and it will be ready. You can also strain it out, and you can use everything that you have left over. I would use cheesecloth or fine mesh strainer. If you're using a different herb, all you have to do is just replace the batch of rosemary, and that's it. Any type of herb you want, basically just do your research, find out what's local to you. You can totally use that as well. Then just follow the remaining instructions. So rosemary, let me tell you what I have learned about rosemary. All right, so rosemary, of course, it's used in Mediterranean cooking and all kinds of other cooking. I've used it very often in my daily, you know, food preparation. So it's really easy. It's a very common thing. But rosemary is native, really, to the seacoast of the Mediterranean. Let's see, I'm kind of reading through. So it protects you from insects, diseases, excessive sun exposure, and water loss. So if you, depending on how you use it, like if you're plucking it off the plant, of course, you can't, you know, stop sun from bothering you or whatever, but it is a really good, it's a really good item or plant to use for your cardiovascular system. It contains all kinds of flavonoids, and it strengthens your capillaries, and it counteracts blood vessels fragility. You know, if you're wanting to build it, you would want to include more rosemary in your diet. So the purpose, elixirs themselves, you know, truly help with colds and all this other stuff. Your cardiovascular system would be the main purpose for using rosemary. So let's see what else.
I have a couple questions for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Since there's honey in there,
yes,
is it okay to turn the jar upside down and just let it run without it damaging the lid?
Absolutely. That's what I've done several times. I think once it's in there, truly the first couple of days, it's not such a big deal, but the corrosive would be if you were to store it upside down. You really don't, you see, it looks like there's a lot of space in there, but I promise there's not.
Right.
But what you want to do is you can shake it several times. You know, the first few days or whatever, it's totally fine. The alcohol's not going to corrode everything from that time. But if you store it upside down like this, of course, that's not ideal. So
okay. And then we have a question. What would be a good herb or some good suggestions for mood or spirit lifters for making an elixir with?
I would totally default to you on that one. You know your herbs a little better than
Okay.
I do.
If your mood is like a depressive mood, a real low mood, I would get some St. John's wort. St. John's wort's an excellent mood lifter, and this is a great way to take it. Passion flower is another one for mood lifting, and I like lavender for mood lifting. If you can get dried lotus flowers, those are also really wonderful for mood elevation. Rose petals, grapefruit peels, those are all really good mood brighteners. Those are my favorites.
That sounds awesome. Maybe I'll do that next.
Sounds like one we need to make, right?
Heck yeah, man. I'm all about it. I'm really into it now. I want to make all kinds. Anything.
I know. Gonna need a separate pantry just for the medicine now.
That's right. I'm totally about that. I think that's great.
Okay.
Go ahead.
You want to go for serum?
Yeah, sure. I'll talk
Okay.
about serums. So when I started looking into what a serum was and what it's good for, I did find that there were two main types of serums. There's your facial serum and then a hair serum. So where it is. Okay.
Corey suggested the coca plant for mood lifting. That takes a
totally
different type
elevate.
of extraction.
Yeah. Definitely not a tincture.
That's not a kitchen extraction.
Well, sativa strains, I believe, also kind of elevate your mood. I'm just saying, indicas.
Just saying.
Just saying. Okay, so when I started looking into the serums, I really didn't. I know that you only use a small
I'm really
amount,
glad you did this because, I'm really glad you did this because I've avoided doing serums too. So I'm glad you did this.
They seemed a little overwhelming, or I was intimidated by them because, I have wrinkles, whatever. I don't care. I have earned every one of these wrinkles and I am down with it. So
Every one of them.
but you can make a facial serum or a hair serum. A facial serum would be good for something like wrinkles or actually, I should probably just default to what I wrote here. That would probably help. Let's see here. So the most common types of serums are hair and facial serums. Serums are used in very small amounts due to the fact that the application is designed to provide the most benefit in a small portion. So serums are typically thinner and lighter than moisturizers, providing a wide variety of functions. They typically have active ingredients in them that you want to penetrate as deeply as possible into your skin or hair. By comparison, moisturizers are typically thicker and creamier than serums designed to hydrate the skin and prevent water loss. So what you're really trying to do with a serum is you want to inject as much as you possibly can into your skin at one time, and then you can put your moisturizer on if you're making a face serum. You want to then put your moisturizer on, which will protect things and rehydrate and all that other stuff. So
Sure.
So for skin and hair, let's talk about the skin for a second. Serums are applied to your skin after cleansing, but before moisturizing, with the intent to deliver a potent shot of ingredients directly into your skin. Generally, serums have a lipid-soluble base, which allows the active ingredients to penetrate into the epidermis instead of lying on the surface like a moisturizer would.
Right.
Face serums treat things like wrinkles, acne, hydration, or brightness. And then you can, the two pictures that you see there, those are rose hips, and we'll go into those in just a minute. So for your hair, these are typically a silicone-based product that coats the surface of your hair. They're designed to protect the hair shaft and glue the cuticle filers. I read that and I thought, well, I guess that's right. I don't know, whatever. They are designed to protect the hair shaft and glue the cuticle filers together, or fillers together, to stop damage. They can be used to reduce frizziness, which I need today, set hairstyles, and protect the hair from environmental aggressors. Serums penetrate deeper, passing the cuticle and reaching the cortex of hair strands. Hair serums provide nourishment to the hair and restores hair damage caused by heat styling or coloring, for example. They can add gloss, reduce frizz on the outer layers of the hair. So when I first started learning about what a serum is, I saw an article that someone had written about rose hips.
Okay.
And to be honest, I really wasn't that familiar. I mean, I've seen them, but I really didn't know that much about them. Well, I discovered that rose hips are very rich in vitamin C. They have almost 9 times more than oranges, which I find very interesting. If I'm not mistaken, and I could be wrong here, don't quote me on this.
They make jam out of it too.
See, that is just super cool. I've the dried ones for sale. I've, even picked some off of the dead, what appears to be dead rose bush in winter. And I'm thinking, oh, well, that's just, it's got to go. I really didn't know that much about it. I'm very disappointed in myself that I didn't do more research before this. But what I learned about is that they are so rich in vitamin C. A lot of times they'll use rose hip serums for people with acne because of the vitamin C content. I had no idea that vitamin C is used to treat. Oh
yeah, it exfoliates the skin, it heals it, gives nutrition to the skin. It's one of the biggest before they start giving really heavy drugs for acne, and it heals the scarring on the face.
So that's fantastic. Both of my sons do not have that issue quite yet, thankfully, knock on wood. But they do, of course, they clean, their face pretty well. My youngest is about to go, he is going through puberty right now. So I've got me some rose hip serum right here waiting on him. Hopefully nice. I won't have to use it, but it's good stuff. It's really good stuff. So, one other thing that I wanted to tell you about rose hips. So let's talk about making it. If you wanted to make a rose hip serum, you can use dried or you can use the fresh ones. If you happen to find the fresh ones, it's not here in the Southeast, it's not quite time yet. But I went on ahead and plucked off a few of them that they weren't perfect, but I wanted to make some for demonstrating for you guys. Sure. So, but you can let them go as long as you want. After the first frost, that's typically the best time for picking. Yes, for picking them. So I went on ahead and just did it right now, and we've not quite had a frost. It's been a little chillier here, but it's definitely not frost. So, all right. So what you're going to need to make this serum is you're going to need rose hips with your stems and leaves removed. You can use dried ones if you want to, but there's a little bit different process for curing each one of these types.
Do you have to reconstitute them before or can you just use them plain old dry?
You can just use them plain old dry, and okay. I'll explain here very shortly what we can do. And I chose avocado oil for this. I could not find organic avocado oil, but I went on ahead and just used, I think if you're using avocado oil is one of my favorites to use. It does get a little bit cloudy at around 70 degrees. It starts hardening.
Okay.
But if you keep it kind of, shaken up and everything, it should be fine. You're just wanting to make sure that your container does not have mildew in it.
Okay.
So you need your avocado oil or whatever type of oil is your favorite, and an airtight jar, of course. So you want to place the rose hips in your jar, cover with the oil to the top, then seal the jar. If you're using dried rose hips, you want to store these in a dark, warm place, or like on a seed mat or something that you can get from Lowe's or Home Depot or your local hardware store or something to that effect. However, if you're using fresh ones, I think I put this in here. Let me take a read real quick. For fresh rose hips, store them in a cool, dark place for a maximum of 6 weeks. Either way, you want to do a maximum of 6 weeks. You can check them occasionally. You want to make sure there's no mold or mildew forming within your mixture there. But if a film does develop on top, you can just kind of scoop that off and it's totally fine.
Okay.
But if it
That's
does,
good to know, because sometimes, you look at that and think, oh, I've ruined it.
That's right. And you're absolutely right. I've done that before. If you see mold or mildew within, yes, of course it's done, and there's really no saving it from that point, but you can try to prevent, you can take measures to prevent that sort of thing from happening.
Kellye, there's a question about which part is the hip. I put up the picture there. Will you explain?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. So when a rose grows, it does have like this little thing that contains the seed. And if there might be, I think there's another picture. I can't remember if I sent that to you or not. I believe I did. The one before this, so number 19, it will show you I've split a rose hip in half, and you can see the seed on the inside there. One thing, you're getting ready to drain these out. So you've let them sit for 6 weeks. Excellent. Thank you. So you've let them sit for 6 weeks and they've done their thing, and you're going to want to strain these out. You can use cheesecloth, or you can use, like I said, a fine mesh strainer. The thing is, though, with rose hips, you can press and push on all kinds of hips, but definitely not these hips. Okay. You don't want to press the rose hips. What happens is it releases water content. And it can also, if you look at the picture, just you can see there are little fine cilia, little fine hairs in there. And that can truly irritate your skin even more. If you've got inflammation on your face, you definitely don't want those little tiny hairs coming in and irritating it a little bit more. It's definitely not a pleasant thing. So when you do strain these out, just strain them out gently. Everything will be fine, and you're getting everything. Truly, it's the skin of the rose hips that you're looking to pull the ingredients from pulling all of the important things.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Kellye.
You've got it. So I think that's about it on rose hips, if there are no other questions.
Does anybody else have any questions on the rose hips? I'm going to change the slide while we wait and see if there's any other questions.
Sure thing.
Okay. So you gave me the term concoction. And a concoction is...
What about wild roses?
Oh,
let's talk about the wild roses. Corey took me up when we were out at the Grand Canyon. We came across wild roses, and the perfume in the air it covered the whole mountain. It was so sweet and beautiful, kind of appley, kind of woody, very sweet floral scent just hanging on the mountain. It was really wonderful. And the roses are small, and it's a really spiny plant, but it spreads a long way. It's a rambler, and that also has rose hips. So, check your areas and see what's around you and see what you can't harvest wild, because they're out there. And boy, that just was I can close my eyes and still smell that. It was just so sweet and wonderful.
Well, I can tell you that I've done a little research, and apparently the wild roses produce the best rose hips, just because they're wild. They haven't really been manipulated. They're just a plant growing out in the wild. So Julian, absolutely, I would collect those as soon as you have your first frost. Run out there and take a look. You'll start to see some that are beginning to wilt or shrivel. Definitely grab those. Store-bought. I see your question there, Silver Creek. I've never done that before. I think basically if you can just find a rose bush, that's probably your best bet. Maybe you have a neighbor, or you see one out in the woods or something to that effect. I really don't know about using store-bought. I don't believe. Alicia, do those actually have the hips?
I have seen rose hips in certain markets. They're usually very dry. Sometimes you'll see rose hip jam.
Oh, yes.
already made. There are some herb companies online that you can get your rose hips from if you don't have wild roses around you, or if you don't grow.
Mediterranean stores for rose hip jam. Yeah. And if you are harvesting your neighbor's roses, make sure they're not spraying them with any pesticides or any other
great
stuff.
That's a good reminder. Corey says if you're harvesting your neighbor's roses, make sure they're not spraying them with pesticides or fertilizers for causing the blooms and things. You can go online. There are a couple of really, really reputable herb companies that you can buy them from. If they're inexpensive, they're probably not organic. So know that probably for rose hips, you're going to spend a little money but it's worth it. It's worth it to get a good dry herb. You don't want to go cheap on those things if you're ordering online.
That's true. And I have seen them a long time ago at Whole Foods, or Sprouts or something like that, where they have the bulk section. You can find them there sometimes.
Okay. And, some of your Mediterranean stores will too.
Yes, absolutely. The Mediterranean stores, I would say, would be even a better bet, because you're going to be a small store. You'd be supporting a really small company as opposed to a big giant, chain corporation franchise thing.
Yeah.
That's my personal. Anyway. But
I agree with that.
You can certainly order them online. And if you do, make sure, as Corey said, that is a fantastic note, making sure that they do not have pesticides or herbicides or anything like that in them. That will be systemic. It will hang out in that oil or in whatever it is that you're using the rose hips for, and you definitely don't want any part of that. So
no, we don't need
the wild roses. Awesome.
We don't need to be putting Monsanto in our homemade medicines.
That's amen. That's exactly right.
Right?
Okay.
There's one more question about that. Does wild equal stronger?
I would have to say it really depends on the strain, on the strain of roses, because you may have a wild rose that isn't quite as potent as something that you could buy and you've grown in your own garden. So I think the strain is probably what it truly depends on.
I think that's true. And also it depends on the weather system for this season too. Did it get the right amount of water? Did it get the right amount of sunlight? Did it frost too earlier? There's variables, involved in anything. It's not as controlled as something you're growing consistently on a regular basis that you have some control over all those elements. But there is something to having a wild crafted medicine. It's out in nature. It's living its organic and genetic DNA. It's doing what it's supposed to. So if you can wildcraft something, I encourage that.
Can I interject 1 second?
Yeah.
So this is my 2 cents here, but I've always approached plants the same way I approach colonies or groups of people. You have zones that plants grow in naturally. If the plant you're harvesting is found at the center of that zone, like the manzanita or the wild rose that we found at 54 to 5,600 feet on a north-facing slope in the fall, you're going to get, it's right in its prime. If saguaro cacti, if you're harvesting the fruit, they grow from sea level to 3,000 feet. So, right about 1,500 feet, you're going to get the most saguaros, and that's right where you find Saguaro National Monument. That also, you take into consideration the soil, whereas saguaros will grow between sea level and 3,000 feet. They're going to grow specifically in better draining soils. So people are the same way. We do very well in valleys where there's plenty of sunlight, and we group ourselves together. Plants have their own distinct personalities. They have their way that they, I guess I can say, if you start looking at plants like people, and where you see them bunching up and doing very, very well, you're going to get specific traits. That being said, like wild roses are chosen and groomed and bred for their flowers, for their blooms, and their less spines and whatnot. In nature, there's natural selection. If you take like Stramonium datura or Jimson weed, there's southwestern thornapple, there's Jimson weed, there's toloache, there's different subspecies in there that grow in certain regions, although it's all the same plant. Some of them are higher in alkaloids and seeds, some are higher in the leaf. So, just like people, certain people are more aggressive. Certain people are based on their environment. Some people are more peaceful. Indians are vegetarians, so they're generally more peaceful people because you don't have those
animal hormones.
The animal hormones going into them. Plants are the same way. So that's really a huge question. And all I can say is, if you're an herbalist or if you're into plants at all, and it's something that you're gonna learn. And you're going to be an expert in your region if you dive into it, but there's no way to be an expert all over the world. If you're coming to the Southwest, find someone that knows the plants here. If you're going to Colorado, find someone that knows the plants there. So that's my 2 cents for what it's worth. But there you go.
Very helpful. Thank you.
All right.
That's great advice. Thank you, Corey. And by the way, Alicia, before we move on, if that place where you found the wild roses is easy to access, after your first frost, I'd go take the crap out of those. I mean, I'm just saying, that would be fantastic to have something like that,
It would be. It would be. It was so beautiful.
That's awesome. I can imagine. I'll bet
Thank
it
you,
was
honey.
fantastic.
Huh? She said if we can go back back to where those roses were after the first frost to collect the hips, we would have a treasure.
Is it easy to access?
No,
it's really not.
It wasn't.
Not at all. But they're there.
But they're there.
Sure, that makes sense.
Oh gosh, thank you for that, Corey. That's really know your plants and know what grows and how it should be growing in your locations. Yeah.
That's absolutely a great point. Yes. Thank you, Corey.
So, as we go on, you gave me a concoction, and as I was like, this is a trick. She's tricking me. A concoction is basically a food or a drink that is concocted, formed, made of various elements. So any of these things are concoctions because you are combining things together. Typically, however, a concoction is a culinary word as it relates to a dish. This concoction is a cross between hot chocolate and a grasshopper, a mixed drink that gets its minty kick from creme de menthe, is a sample. However, in alchemy, a concoction is alchemy is a primary profession that mixes herbs found by herbalism and sometimes other reagents to generate elixirs, potions, oils, flasks, cauldrons, with a variety of effects, as well as transmute minerals, gems, and elementals. So concoction, while it is a noun, it's kind of an act. It's a verb too, because you're concocting, you're blending things together.
Sure.
With the purpose of restoring health and mana, grant temporary invisibility, grant temporary good luck through treasure finding, temporary change of appearance, temporarily improve statistics, and much more in the world of alchemy. So there's a little fun fact about the use of the word concoction. What is the method of concocting? Plan your outcome. What is your goal? Organize and combine your herbs accordingly. And you can add them to food, tea. You make a tisane, a decoction, infusion, an unguent, lotions, creams, liniments, syrups, compresses, poultice, bath, etc. So you can consume it or you can use it. As an application, you can eat or drink it, or you can use it as an application. You can use it as an ingredient in spell work. Concoction is kind of a catch-all word for putting things together. So where that takes us to, I'm going to change the screen here a little bit because there. The next couple, Kellye had me look up and work on decoction. So are you making a tea or a decoction? Herbal teas and decoctions are names of different types of herbal water preparations. They each vary slightly in how they're made, and the end goal is to extract the chemical constituents from the plant material and transfer it into water. The water is drunk or inserted into the body in the case of an enema or a douche, and the body easily absorbs the constituents because water is a carrier. Tea is commonly drunk for enjoyment and taste, where infusions and decoctions are made for medicinal benefits. Teas are light in color and flavor, and infusions and decoctions are much darker in color and stronger in flavor. All of these preparations can be sweetened before drinking. Teas and tisanes are made using the soft parts of the herbs, the flowers, the stems, and the leaves, by pouring water over the herbs and allowing them to steep for a certain period of time. Decoctions are made by simmering harder herbs like roots, nuts, seeds, and barks over a low heat for another set amount of time. And we're going to go on and talk about that. A decoction is the method of placing the plant material in boiling water, which releases more of the essential oils and flavor. Decoctions are often used for plant material with tougher surfaces or smaller surface areas. For this reason, leaves, flowers, seeds, and seed tisanes are generally steeped infusions, whereas bark, root, and berry tisanes are generally prepared as decoctions. How to decoct your herbs. You'll do this for tea and tisanes as well as decoctions. So you need 1.5 ounces or 40 grams of herb and 1.5 pints of water. And you're going to put your herbs in the saucepan, cover and boil it. And you're going to bring it to a boil, and then you're going to turn it down. As soon as your boil starts to roll, you want to turn it down to your lowest heat. It's tricky on an electric stove, so you have to pay attention to it. And you're going to simmer it for 10 to 15 minutes. Let it cool, strain, and pour. And you'll pour that into a clean container. It comes out thick and brown and really aromatic, and I can smell it a little bit from the jar, but this one was really delicious to have. It made the whole house smell like an Indian marketplace. It was wonderful.
That sounds yummy.
Yeah. And your it will keep for 2 to 3 days. So, if you're not feeling well and you're making decoctions to get yourself back on track, you're going to need to brew one up every couple of days. Your dose is a half cup twice a day for normal conditions, and as a tonic when you need a little pick-me-up, or a half a cup 3 to 6 times a day for acute illness, for active or acute illness. Decoctions can be diluted with equal part water and used the same way as a water infusion for hand baths and gargles. So if you need to, if you have an injury and you're soaking your hands or your feet, or you want to put it in your tub, it's fine to dilute it with additional water. And it is recommended to consume them hot. Some suggestions for herbal decoctions. For bark, you can use cinnamon, black haw, cramp bark, slippery elm. Slippery elm, any of these things here with a little asterisk and a plus by them, we'll talk about in a second. And willow. Roots and rhizomes include astragalus, ashwagandha, chicory, black cohosh, burdock, dandelion, echinacea, eleuthero, ginger, licorice, kava, marshmallow, turmeric, wild yam, and yellow dock. Those are all root plants. Seeds, nuts, and berries include cardamom, one of our favorites here, coriander, another of our favorites here, fennel, another of our favorites here, elderberry, hawthorn, kola nut, milk thistle, rose hips, schizandra, and vitex. And mushrooms that you can use for decoctions are chaga, cordyceps, maitake, oyster mushrooms, reishi, shiitake, and turkey tail. If you're using fresh and not dried, of course, you need double the volume of plant material to your water volume. And some of these are best as the little plus next to them, they're best as a cold water infusion. So that's a long soak in cool water, basically, for the purpose of this conversation today. Heating them, they're a little bit, since they're a little bit delicate, even though they're roots, barks, and things, they're a little bit delicate, and heating them doesn't bring out all the things that you want in them. Just a cold water soak is best for those items like cramp bark and slippery elm and astragalus and marshmallow root. So those are some suggestions for things you might want to have on hand for decocting. A tea versus a tisane. Most tisanes should be prepared as an infusion or decoction. Infusions are how we make tea, pouring boiling water over plant material, also called steeping. Tea is made from Camellia sinensis. Tea is from one plant. There are all kinds of varieties and all kinds of levels of fermentation. So you have a white needle, you have a silver needle, you have green tea, you have black tea. When a tea is made or picked, it's picked at a certain age for a green tea. It's picked at another age for black tea. And some tea leaves are crushed, which causes the leaves to turn black and ferment. And that's how you have black tea. Some tea is picked by monkeys, to tell you the truth.
Wow.
Because people can't get up in the trees, and they train the monkeys, and the monkeys go pick it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So tea comes from a specific plant. Anything else that's herbal is a tisane. And so lavender flowers, chamomile, passion flower. The teas that Corey and I have in our tea shop, those would be really tisanes, because there's no Camellia sinensis in it. My mouth won't say it today. But there's no actual tea leaves in it. So there's the difference. A tisane is made from herbs, the soft parts like the leaves and the flowers. Tea has caffeine, a tisane does not. Tea is poured over or infused with hot water, same as a tisane. You use 3 grams of herbs for 8 fluid ounces at 190 to 205 degrees. Brew 3 to 5 minutes, and mind your temperature and brewing time. Some types of tea have longer brewing times and specific temperatures to get the best out of it. And some teas are recommended that you steep them several times. You pour your first one, you steep it, you pour your second one, you steep it a little longer, and if you're buying tea that's not in a box, in a bag, on your grocery shelf, your tea will come with some steeping instructions on how to do that. So follow those instructions and you will have a really lovely little personal tea ceremony and enjoyment and interacting with your tea. It's a nice, relaxing ritual to have with your tea. Cold brew uses the same ratio of plant to water as a hot brew does, and infuse for 4 to 12 hours. That's for brewing either.
That is really cool. I had no idea. I learned a whole bunch today. Sorry, keep
That's
going.
okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. So some suggestions for herbal tisanes. When you brew with fresh herbs, double your plant per 8 ounces. So if you're using 3 grams of dry herb, you're going to use 6 grams of fresh herb and 2 to 8 ounces of water. An herbal infusion or similar preparation drunk as the beverage for its mildly medicinal effect. Catnip, chamomile, lavender, lemon balm. Lemon verbena is so wonderful. Lemongrass, mint, rosemary, rose, and thyme are some suggestions for herbs for making an herbal tisane. So we get to the bottom of this, pardon me, and labeling your medicinals is really important. You want to have a label that tells you when you first put your things in there, all of your ingredients, and then when you're done, you want to label it again so that you know how long your final product has on the shelf. Some products have a few days on the shelf, and some products can go a year. How do you determine that for your shelf, Kellye?
It truly depends on what it is that I'm making. Certain things, I can make something that will stay in the same jar. So I don't really have to do anything. But I do have, you can go to Avery.com and you can create your very own type of label. I've created all kinds of labels.
I love Avery. I use it for everything.
Me too. And you can use that for just about everything. And mainly the elements that I want to make sure that I have on my label is what it is, the date that I started, maybe an estimated finished curing date or something like that. You can also put maybe an expiration date, maybe not necessarily expiring, but something, it may not be as strong, or maybe, you want to kind of keep an eye on those type of things. But someone had mentioned mullein a little while ago. Holy cow. That's one of my favorite plants to work with. That plant can be used for all kinds of things. It is a fantastic plant. And something else that I always keep on hand, if you don't have, excuse me, access to a computer printer or something like that, or you don't have labels, gosh, you can use masking tape. Just something, making sure that you're able to label it with the essentials. And also one of these things, a Sharpie, is one of the best things that you can possibly use. What you can do is you can just write on the outside of the jar or on the top of the jar, what you have with a Sharpie. The chances of it being washed off with water are very slim until you're able to get something that you can make a true label for. And something else to consider too, I noticed this, when you're using oils and alcohols, not necessarily so much with honey, but oils especially, what happens is if you write something on there with a Sharpie and you put your label on there and you've done everything, the problem is it can rub off, or it can fall off. The labels sometimes don't stick with alcohol, or especially with oils. So sometimes I'll put like a number on the bottom here, and I'll have a little notepad that I will write down, the corresponding information that I've put on the label on my jar. I'll copy that same information in my little notebook. So if the label falls off, I've at least got some place, or even on the top, I've got some place on my jar that I can go back and reference and say, okay, well, I lost half of that label. I have no idea what it was, but maybe it's something important. And so just sort of a backup plan, I guess.
Okay, that's a really good suggestion. I will use rubbing alcohol to wipe my bottle down.
Yes.
And then stick a label. But sometimes if the contents runs down, it loosens the label anyway. So that's a really great idea.
Yes.
There's a question here. Does refrigeration help or hinder?
I hate to say this. It truly depends on what it is. Generally, I think the finished product, yes, it will help prolong certain things. However, for example, if you're, where is it here? Your rose hips serum, there are certain things, if you're using fresh ones, you don't want to put this in heat, but you definitely don't want to store it during the process. You definitely don't want to put it in the refrigerator. If you're using dried rose hips, you absolutely don't want to put anything in the refrigerator while you're trying to make the product, just because it needs to have that
little bit of room temperature.
So if you're using a seed mat, absolutely, or slightly even warmer than room temperature, but after you've made your product and you have filtered out the rose hips and or whatever it is that you're making, I do believe that it can help prolong things, and I would definitely store it in the refrigerator, or at least in a cool, dark place, in a cabinet somewhere or something like that that's absent from sunlight. So that's my personal opinion. What do you think?
I second that opinion. Most of these things are extracted with things that are fine at room temperature. Some of them, if the plant material that you've put in there is hard to get or hard to, once it's done and you want it to last, probably the refrigerator. But generally they're, like your decoctions. Once you make those should be refrigerated until you warm it up to drink it again while you're medicating. But I would agree with that. There were some questions in here about dosing, like how much infusion or elixir do you take? Do you take a tablespoon? Do you take a teaspoon? How do you dose yourself and do you put it in alcohol? Can you put it in another drink? Because, there are alcoholic beverages that are called elixirs that become an elixir because you've put your already made menstruum in there. So
that's true. What I like to do, I'll use this one as an example, the white pine infused in honey. So let's say I have a really sore throat and I feel like crap. Well, you may not be in the mood to take a teaspoon and just scoop some out, which you can actually do that. That's not a problem. But let's say you've not strained out anything and you still have your plant matter. What you can do is you can take your teaspoonful, if you have strained it or not, it doesn't matter, and dump it into, or just take the whole teaspoon itself with your honey on it, just stick it in the bottom of a coffee cup or something. And then you can pour on some hot water. This is the best way for me.
That's my favorite.
It truly is. It's really awesome. You're getting the steam from it. You're getting like a little fresh, quick tea. But that's how I do it. I'll just use a spoonful of something. Now, if you're using something, say the elixir, for example, that has alcohol and honey, equal parts in there. If you have a cough, and if you're at home, and if you're doing, whatever it is that you're doing, it's probably not a bad idea to use a dropper for something like that. Unless it's in the refrigerator, it will thicken up a little bit just because, the honey is a little thicker. However, the alcohol will prevent the honey from getting really super thick like it normally would by itself. But if you've got something that, for example, your rose hips or whatever type of serum you've made or something, I would absolutely recommend using a dropper for those types of things, because you don't have to worry about contamination by dipping your finger in something, even if it's your pinky. If you've got it and you put it into, I don't have it in here with me, but you can put it in a very small tincture bottle, and that works just fine. And you can drop however many drops you need. And to me, that works well.
Yeah, you can get a dozen tincture bottles very inexpensively on Amazon, and in any size, and stick your label on them and have your stuff ready to go.
Absolutely. Now, there is a recommendation, or at least my opinion. There's a company called Premium Vials.
Okay.
I order all of my vials from them. And the reason I do is because I can get whatever color I want. If I'm creating something, back in the day, about 140 years ago, something like that, they would typically use jars. The pharmacists would use jars that were color coded. If it's amber or clear, those were totally safe to use, but the blue ones were poison. That's how they used to do it way back in the day. So, but nowadays, and if it's in your own house, or that's up to you. You decide what your poison jar looks like. Something that's not meant for internal use, something that's only meant for external. You can totally decide. You make those rules in your own house.
That's excellent. That's really excellent advice too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any more questions? We've really appreciated having you on here today, Kellye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. It's been a blast. And thanks everybody for showing up. Thanks, Mom.
Wonderful. All right. Are there any more questions before we hang up for the day? We'll give it a minute to come in because there's a little bit of a delay. All your bottles look so beautiful.
Thank you.
It was fun to put your information into the slideshow. Thank you.
It was really fun. I enjoyed this.
Someone had a question. Someone had a question about California poppies or Mexican poppies or desert poppies. There's two primary kinds of poppies out here that grow in Arizona and California. We have the prickly poppy, which has a white. You find those growing in waste places where the topsoil has been eroded by tractors and grading and farming and whatnot. Both these are considered, that one's considered a noxious weed by farmer. It has a white, looks like an egg. It kind of looks like a fried egg. That poppy contains opiates. Okay. And if you distill that down and go out, you're gonna pull opiates, depending on how determined you are to do it. You can get them out of that. The other one you're talking about, we had a question in the chat, was about the California poppy or the Mexican poppy, which is basically the same plant with just regional differences.
With the golden petals.
Yeah, golden or orange. They come in both colors. I think the California one is going to be the yellow one, if I'm not mistaken. They contain phytochemistry that falls under sub-opiates. Okay. They're good for people with PTSD. They're good to bring people down from elevated stress. And yes, I guess you could use them to wean people off of opiates. However, that's a really serious medical condition. People coming down off opiates, in my opinion, are going to require, depending on how long they've been and what degree they're on, they're going to require that some serious medical intervention, I would think, just because the consequences can be suicide and can be physiological as well. I would not, as a home therapist, attempt to, unless we're in a survival situation or the doctors or hospitals aren't taking people, I wouldn't take that on. I would leave that to someone. We have better stuff to help people facilitate that with. However, you can make a tincture out of California and prickly poppy, and it's the entire plant from the ground up, not the roots. And I believe, if I remember right, the last time I did it, it was a 50-50 tincture of distilled water, and I used Everclear, which is 95%. Some plants extract better at half tincture.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Oh, you did, Doctor?
Yeah.
Okay, and you got that. And that one, I believe, is a 50-50 tincture. And it helps people, like I said, with PTSD, quiets the mind a little bit, but it's not really an opiate. It's a sub-opiate. So there's literature out there on the internet if you're interested in that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's, wanted to add that to there. Okay,
Thank you.
I'm going back to
Thank you.
I'm so
Thank
lucky.
you. That's great information.
I'm so
I had no
lucky.
idea. That's super cool.
Oh, thank you, Corey.
Well, thank you for bringing me onto your show. I feel honored to be here.
I
you
love working with
very
you. It was
much.
a lot of fun.
It was fun. It was very educational. I didn't really know a lot about certain things. One thing, there was one other thing that I wanted to mention really quickly before we go. There is an app. My father introduced me to this app, and I am absolutely fully impressed with it. And I've been using it every single day, several times a day. And the app is EE, and it is part of, I believe, iNaturalist, I think is what the company that's affiliated with this is. So Seek, S-E-E-K, and I do believe it's also for Android, but I know for a fact it is for Apple products. And what
I
you
did
do
put
is-
it. I did get it and put it on my phone. I have an Android. I'm going to put the link in here.
Excellent, thank you.
This
This
is
is
a
what it
really
looks
fun
like
app.
opening up, and then once you get in here, you can snap a photo of something, and you ask the application to identify it for you, and it gives you all kinds of information about these plant identifiers. I have about 3 or 4 other plant identification applications on my phone, but that one's my favorite right now. And I mean, it is just wonderful. And let's say you're out in the woods and you have no cell service, you can also snap a picture and save it, in your phone or whatever. And then once you're back in range, you can go back into the application, and it gives you an option of either using the camera and snapping a picture of something there, and then, or you can actually go to your photos, and you can click on a photo that you've already taken and tell it to identify, and it will identify that for you. So it's pretty cool. It's also a great thing to have. Yes, I just saw someone say it's a good way to not poison yourself.
Yes.
Absolutely correct. And if you're out in the woods and you need to know, oh my gosh, is that poison oak or poison ivy, or is that something I probably should be avoiding? It's good to know which plants to avoid, unless you've got, say, someone that happens to be a tour guide with you, which may know exactly which plants to use and which ones to stay the heck away from.
Stop rubbing that one on your rear end.
Definitely don't use that one as TP for sure. So.
Kelly's saying that it's a very, unless you have somebody with you who is a native tour guide who knows, an ethnobotanist who knows what not to be wiping your rear end with out in nature. It's probably a good app to take with you.
That's absolutely true. One of those helpful suggestions. Yeah. That's the
great.
truth.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm
you
in.
guys.
Thank you guys. Thank you, Kelly. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate you and Corey very much. You guys are awesome.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone. Hi.
Thank
Again.
you all for being here and for letting us get through our technical difficulties again today.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being patient with us.
Show.
It was. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to figure out where to turn this off at now. Here, right here on the finish button. We're finishing now. Thank you.
Okay.
See you
Bye,
tonight.
everyone.
What time is your show, hon?
We'll go at 6 tonight.
Okay, 6 tonight on the Phoenix Enigma. So
Awesome,
we'll see you
awesome.
there. Thank you.
See you guys later. Thank you again.
See you
Bye.
later.
Bye-bye.